Football is king in the state of Texas. Whether you're a state championship quality team or whether you're one that just shows up on Friday nights, to be a football player or a cheerleader meant a lot. The community knew who the players were, they knew who the cheerleaders were.
It was a source of pride to get to be a varsity cheerleader. And it just wasn't possible that anything bad could ever touch our world.
But we had no idea that there was this monster out there.
As we start going through the materials, we come across a cheerleading photograph. Pretty soon, a light bulb goes off. It seems like he's just picking his victims by might be next in that picture.
It was a Thursday, it was rainy. It was January, so it was dark already at 6 o'clock. When I got home from work, the whole house was dark and the door was open. So that was my first clue that something was not right. I walked up to the door and I reached inside the door and turned a light on. And there was blood everywhere. All over the carpet, all over the walls, everywhere that you could see. And I walked in and yelled for her, and she didn't answer. And at that point, I don't really know what I thought. But my sister lived in a little guest house behind the house next door. And I went over there and told her to come back over there with me. She got her baseball bat and walked back over there with me. The blood trail kind of led to Retha's room. So we walked that direction, and it's almost like he had tried to shove her in the closet, but the door didn't catch. Her wrists were slit. The knife was still stuck in her chest. I remember thinking, she can't be dead. I just have to get her help. She just couldn't be dead. She couldn't be.
The body of 18-year-old Retha Stratton was found Thursday. The former cheerleader had been stabbed 38 times. The woman grew up in River Oaks, lived just inside the Fort Worth city line near her hometown.
On the night of January 21st, 1982, I was the homicide detective assigned to the Homicide Division of the Fort Worth Police Department. The first call I received was sometime after 6 p.m. Someone had shared information with the police dispatcher that they had found a deceased body out in River Oaks. I drove there, which would take about, from downtown Fort Worth, would take about 15 minutes. As I walked into the door of the house, it was a very bloody crime scene, very bloody. You could see where the attack had occurred on the living room floor. There was blood splatters all up and down that wall. As I followed the blood trail through the hallway and into the bedroom, you could easily see 2 legs sticking out of the bedroom closet. Retha had 38 stab wounds in her chest, a very small area. And every time you stick that knife in and you bring it back, you're slinging blood backwards. And the blood on the wall by the light switch is indicative of 38 stab wounds. The knife was just a normal kitchen serrated knife, about 10 to 12 inches. It was still embedded in her chest. And both of her wrists had been cut. And I'm not talking about just being cut a little bit. Both these wrists were cut at least halfway through, but there wasn't any bleeding. So that allowed me to know that was done after her heart quit beating. It's ghastly. The crime scene will speak to you. What it spoke to me as a homicide detective was there was too much damage done to the body. Whoever killed Aretha went overboard. And the expression on her face, it was a look as if, avenge me, I wasn't supposed to die this way. Help me. I was going to work on it as hard as I could.
Well, growing up in River Oaks, it was a small little community. Seems like we knew everyone. My mom was a hairdresser, so lots of people came to her beauty shop, and I could hardly go down a street that there wasn't someone that we knew. Just felt like it was a very safe little area to grow up in.
Football season in our little community, it was a big deal. It just felt so charged with energy, and the whole community, would come, and you just felt so much pride being able to put on the cheerleading uniform.
The lights would come on Friday night, and that was when the community would come watch and just be there to support the students. The cheerleaders running in front of the football players.
Life in high school definitely circled around football. And you run through a banner going onto the field. It was an awesome feeling. It was, I don't know, you felt kind of empowered. It's a hard feeling to describe as a 17, 18-year-old kid. You felt very special.
Aretha was always the little quiet one. I remember her saying, I'm going to be a cheerleader. And I think I fell over on the floor laughing. And she wanted to do what her friends were doing.
The football players and the cheerleaders were very close.
Everyone kind of knew each other. Roxy was my neighbor across the street, and Scott grew up down the street. Rusty lived very close. Wesley Miller was dating Roxy. He was always around, and my family knew Aretha's family. For the most part, we had grown up together.
And everybody had a crush on Aretha. Everybody loved her.
Aretha Stratton was the all-American girl. She was the blonde, blue-eyed cheerleader, most popular, made good grades, everyone's friend. And she was always, always positive, upbeat and bubbly, and never a bad word to say about anyone.
Aretha had a confidence about her in high school that made her just carry herself well. And because she had an older boyfriend, Dale, that made her even more interesting.
She was pretty feisty. She didn't mind voicing her opinion or telling you what she thought, how she felt, which was good. That's a good thing. That's probably largely what led to what happened. I think she fought. Aretha was a fighter.
She did put up a fight. She had some defensive wounds to both hands where she had tried to grab the knife. It was a sexual assault, at least a sexual assault attempt for someone to do something like this. There was no indication of any type of forced entry into that house. Nothing was amiss. At the time, some information was relayed to me through our police dispatcher. Serial rapist had been in River Oaks for several months. That night, it became clear that there was a psycho on the loose.
I was a junior in the fall of 1980 and 1981. I was a cheerleader with Retha Stratton. I wasn't like super close with Retha because I lived in Lake Worth and everyone else in River Oaks. I just, I was around her because we were cheerleaders. She was fun to be around.
Susan Brown as a student, Susan Brown as a friend would be exactly the role model that anyone would want of their daughter. Just, you want to be around her.
That night, we were having a basketball game at Boswell High School. I didn't have my driver's license at the time, so I needed a ride. My parents went out to some dinner with some friends. My friend Roxy was supposed to come and pick me up. It was around 7. I get this call on the phone. A man's voice then says, "Is Mr. Brown there?" And I said, "No, he's not here." Then I hear a click on the other end that hung up. Just shortly right after that, my sister called. So I'm on the phone and I hear the door open. I came around the corner from her hallway. A man is standing there in our little entry area with a mask on and no shirt, jeans, and the jeans are open, like already unzipped and everything. And I knew something really bad was about to happen. I just ran. I ran as hard as I could through our house, but he was faster than me. He caught up with me. He grabbed me and ripped my bloomers off. If I was screaming, he would be like, "Be quiet, shut up." I ended up on my back, and at that point, I was just trying to cover myself, and he would hit me. So I was getting hit if I didn't release my hands. All of a sudden, he just got up and told me to turn over. At that point, I didn't know if he was going to shoot me, but I did. Maybe he realized I had been on the phone with my sister and I had dropped the phone, and maybe he realized there was someone hearing me scream, or I don't know, but he got up and left. I'd waited until he left out at the door, and I immediately ran over to the window just to see, but it was dark. And all I could see was a car leaving with taillights.
For that particular game, Roxy arrived late and Susan didn't come at all. We were really upset. Like, you guys know we're supposed to be here and we can't even do our stunts.
The police showed up shortly after that. They didn't take me to the hospital. They didn't do the rape kit. They didn't do all the things that you should do after rape. And to this day, it's very frustrating for me why that didn't happen. Anyway, so, that was my Friday night. And it changed my life forever.
We were upset with Roxy for coming late and not picking Susan up. It wasn't until later that we found out that Roxy just didn't go get her. And then Roxy let us know that she and her boyfriend, Wesley, had been in an argument, and so she just didn't go pick up Susan. She just didn't bring her. It didn't really make sense to us.
Like a week later, the police did a lineup, and they said, "Can you pick someone out?" There were 6 men they had lined up, and I couldn't tell because the pantyhose was so distorting of his face that I couldn't pick out one person and say that that person raped me. I knew that the person was probably like 18 to maybe 24-ish, 5'8", 5'9", stocky build. That was it. My father had, I guess he had remembered there was a salesman that came to our house the day before. My father just thought, oh, this is the same, it must be the salesman. I guess he'd left a card or something. So Dad had given the information to the police officer, the Lake Worth Police Department, and they tracked down the man. He was, 6'1". He had a hairy chest. He didn't meet, this description that I had given the police department of someone that was, 5'8", 5'9", stocky build, hardly any hair on the chest at all. Go back to school Monday. The girls, they were like, "How come you weren't there, and what happened?" And I remember just being like, well, I had something happen, and I really didn't let others know.
We really were kind of upset still at Susan, and we were kind of railing on, well, she should have found a ride, and I don't understand why she couldn't get here. Finally, our cheerleading sponsor kind of had to say, look, something bad has happened to her, and you need to knock it off. Like, don't ask her about it either. We were told someone had attacked her, but we didn't get more information.
I was 16. At the time, rape was still like, oh, what did you do to instigate that? I didn't want anyone knowing. I know this sounds terrible. I felt very shameful.
We never, sadly, talked to Susan. She just kind of privately suffered.
She wanted to keep it quiet. So as far as how we handled it, we were more concerned on where we were going to have our prom that year.
Honestly, we really didn't feel threatened. Since River Oaks was such a safe place to be, there was no discussion about anything we should be aware of.
But the police told me, it's someone you know. We want you to go back to school. We want you to look around. We want you to see if there's somebody that you've been around. And I'm like, I don't know anyone that would do something like that. When I went back to cheering, I thought, well, maybe it's someone's watching me in the stands. I was doing my cheerleading, but in my brains, I was looking at everyone in the stands, trying to see if I noticed them watching me or something. And then the other rape started. In September, the football season started up. Still didn't know who assaulted and raped me. Some of the football players, They would come up to me and they would be like, "What is wrong with you?" I guess I wasn't smiling like I usually would smile, but I couldn't tell them. And then I heard about the next one.
As fall comes around, we find out that we have another victim in a nearby town, Saginaw, Texas. This individual was also sexually assaulted in their home. It starts out very similar to some of the other crimes. They report getting a phone call, asking for someone who's not at that address. It was a pattern that had started with sexual assault of a cheerleader at Castleberry High School and had continued and progressively gotten more bold, more daring.
December 7th, 1981 was kind of a typical day for me. I lived with my parents and I was working at a grocery store, worked the late shift, got off at midnight, and I didn't really have any big plans for the next day. My mother was in the last stages of a degenerative disease. She was sitting in the den and she was unable to move independently. She had awareness, but was not very communicative. I was asleep in the back bedroom. The door opened to my bedroom. That woke me up, and I was kind of becoming aware of who's in the doorway. And I realized they had a mask on. All I saw at that moment was the jeans and the t-shirt. He leapt on to the bed and pulled back the covers. He was choking me. My thoughts then are going to, oh my God, where's my mother? I don't know if he's killed my mother. I said, where's my mother? And in a whispery voice said, I won't hurt her if you do what I tell you to do. He kind of kept his head down, had on jeans, pulled his pants down, penetrated, finished. He said, turn over. And I was, at that moment, that's the first time I felt scared for myself. I really thought he was gonna kill me. And he said, I promise I won't hurt you. I rolled over, he got dressed, ran out of the room. As soon as I could hear him running down the hall, I got up and I ran after. I got there in time to see him passing my mom, and he already had the masks off. And I noticed that he had kind of longer, dark hair.
What makes this assault unique is that her mother was in the home when the assault occurred. So whoever perpetrated that crime knew Lisa's family and knew the condition of her mother.
The fact that whoever had done that to me walked right past my mother with no fear that she was going to be able to communicate who it was or follow him or challenge him. It was really unsettling. I asked my mom, are you okay? And she asked, who is that? And at that moment, I knew I couldn't tell her what had happened. And so I just said, it was just a friend, it's okay. So I ran and got the phone and I called a friend. I'm like, here's what's just happened. And I'm crying, and she said, do not shower. I'm coming to get you. And she's like, we have to take you to the hospital.
I do recall talking to Lisa after she was raped. Talked to her soon thereafter, and she was hysterical. When she told me that she'd been attacked, I was shocked and I was sad for her. I mean, that was my friend. And I didn't really think back on Susan. Probably should have, but I just didn't put it together at that time.
On December 8th, the day following the assault on Lisa Tickner, the sister of another cheerleader was sexually assaulted in her home.
When I found out that Roxy's sister had also been raped, I knew I had to go over there so that we could compare. As it turns out, the shirt sounded similar, the build sounded similar, the jeans. It sounded clearly like this was the same person.
Lisa was raped, and then Roxy's sister was raped, and then they lived just across the street from each other. So everyone was at that point really, really concerned.
The atmosphere was intense in River Oaks. You noticed that girls were not alone anymore. They would go with their friends, make sure they stayed in groups.
Aretha called me and told me that there had been some attacks in the River Oaks area. I was just floored. I said, why have we not heard about this? And she says, I don't know. She goes, you know, I've just heard from some friends.
December of 1981, Retha Stratton moved into a home with her best friend.
We were cautious. We had started locking our door at night. We're kind of on guard a little bit. But we weren't really scared. Retha would go out of my parents' house and do laundry there. That week, she had gone by the house and was picking up some laundry. And as she was leaving, my dad told her, Aretha, be careful because that guy that, you know, attacked your friends is still out there. There's bad people out there. And she says, Daddy, he'll have to kill me first. He'll never rape me. He'll have to kill me first.
While River Oaks may be the home of champions, it's also the home of a rumor that is getting bigger each time it's told. The rumor, a rapist has been terrorizing the bedroom community over the last 1 to 3 weeks.
Most of the victims are from River Oaks, from Castleberry High School, or at least surrounding areas. They were high school cheerleaders, most of them. The crimes increase in intensity, though. He's just getting more and more brazen and more bold about the assaults. But for some reason at the time, law enforcement either wasn't putting those together or they were not sharing with the community that they had put those together.
Chief W.S. Schertz denies his office is trying to keep frightened residents in the dark, but still he says the rumors keep flying.
I understood there was one lady called the police station yesterday and was wanting to know if anything had happened because she was going to the beauty shop and she needed something to talk about.
So I can remember being there at work and then getting a phone call, and it was my husband. He said, your dad just called me, and he was real upset, and he said that your sister's been killed. I didn't break down. I didn't start crying. Immediately, I wanted answers. You know, like, who did this? You know, is this the same person that raped the girls? I get to Aretha's house. I see several policemen. So then I walked up on the porch, and my mom was there, and other people.
And the main thing I wanted to do at that point in time in my investigation was make a list of the people who had been in the house. Amy and her sister, Aretha's paramour, Dale, was there, took a deposition from them about the 5 W's, who, what, why, where, and when. Amy was very difficult to take a statement from. She was so emotional. There was times we just had to sit and let her go through what she was going through. It was easy for me to realize that she's not a suspect. You couldn't fake what she had. But with Dale Kinson being there, I definitely listed him as a possible suspect.
When they started their relationship, Dale was a junior in high school, and Aretha was in 8th grade. And my parents were not going to let their 8th grader date with a guy that was 4 years older than she was. So Dale and Aretha started their relationship sitting on the front porch. And they continued to date all through school. Dale had dark brown eyes, and he played football build type guy.
Retha and him looked cute together and made a cute couple. But we've all watched all the crime shows. First person you look at is the boyfriend or the husband. I know my parents loved Dale like he was their own child, but you still never know, did Retha and Dale get in some big fight? What happened?
When I interviewed Dale, it came up that he had an appointment, allegedly, with Retha to get his haircut at 6:30 p.m. that same evening. And he had gotten off work around 4. He went home and changed clothes. He lived at home with his mom and dad. There was some cleaning that needed to be picked up at a certain cleaner's. He allegedly went over and picked that up. I asked Dale, I said, Dale, do you have a receipt? He says, I can get you a receipt. He brought that in, and then his mother validated that. The only time that he was away from his mother and daddy was the time that he went to the cleaners, which was the time that the offense occurred, so that ruled him out.
Later that night, Dale and I went back over to the house, trying to make sure that the police were doing what they were supposed to do. And at some point, there was a girl in the street that called out for Dale. So I go with Dale to, meet her close to the street, and they start talking, and she tells Dale, says, I drove by around 5:30 or 6. I saw a red truck parked up on Skyline Drive, and it was parked away from the curb. It looked odd. And so I looked at both of them and I said, who drives a red truck? And they both said, the only person we know is Wesley Miller. The only other way I know this name is from Retha telling me that name in association to the rapes. A couple of weeks before Retha's killed, she was telling me about all the rapes. And I asked Retha, what's the deal? Who's doing this? And she says, well, the only thing I've heard is that the attacker looked like Wesley Miller. And I'm like, who's Wesley Miller? And she said, that's Roxy's boyfriend. And I asked her, I said, so would he do something like that? I mean, is he crazy? Is he, abusive? What's the deal? And she said, no. She goes, he's really kind of a quiet guy. Says he doesn't say much, and I can't imagine, that he would do something like that.
Dale Kinson told me that he had talked to an associate that had seen a truck parked on Skyline Drive that matched a description of a truck that was driven by a person named Wesley Miller. First time I'd ever heard his name. I didn't know the veracity of that, but it's unusual to park a vehicle there, so I had to check that out. I knew I didn't have much time because we have a murder on the loose. It's early Friday morning now. We were planning to canvass the neighborhood and knock on doors since we'd been told that there was a truck parked on Skyline Drive. I met a lady. She says, yes, I saw a truck. And she knew when that truck was not there before 5 o'clock, and it was not there after 6 o'clock. And she gave a description of the truck. Everybody out in River Oaks was assured that just had to be Wesley Wayne Miller's truck. He was a prime suspect at that point in time.
Wesley Wayne Miller was part of our group. He was always around. He was the boyfriend of Roxy. He played football. There wasn't a lot else that was truly standout remarkable about him.
While in high school, Wesley was a leader on their football team, looked up by his teammates. He was a year older than I was, so I looked at him for guidance. When we heard that he was a suspect, it was just hard for us to wrap our minds around the fact that less than a year ago, he was one of our teammates. Retha was one of our cheerleaders. We'd all hung out together, gone out to dinner, gone over to each other's house. How could this possibly have happened with one of our own?
It was around 9:30 p.m. Somebody called the River Oaks Police Department, confided in them anonymously that Wesley Wayne Miller's girlfriend had washed his bloody blue jeans on the evening of January 21st.
The night of Retha's murder was actually Wesley's girlfriend's birthday. And when he showed up, he had blood on his jeans and blood on his shoes. He says that he got blood on his clothes playing football. She takes the jeans and she washes them. Wesley's girlfriend, Roxy, was brought in for questioning.
Roxy said Wesley got to her house about 5:45 or 5:50. So now we know when Retha got home from work. We know when Amy found her. We know when Wesley showed up at Roxy's house 3 minutes down the road with bloody blue jeans. It all fit together like a puzzle. So now we have reasonable grounds to see what Wesley Miller has to say for himself.
An arrest warrant was issued, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, Wesley Wayne Miller was arrested and taken into custody.
Wesley's demeanor was rather nonchalant, and it was shared with him why he was being arrested. Didn't say anything. I mean, there wasn't any emotion in him. When I interviewed him, he rather surprised me because he just looked up and said, "I'll talk to you about it." I took his statement from him, so I sat down at my typewriter. Then he gets to telling the story that he had a prearranged meeting with Retha, and they had this thing going between them. Something happened and they got into a fight. He ended up having a knife, and, I just lost my mind. His story of having an affair with her was all hogwash. He just made all that up. And I knew it was BS, but he was admitting what he had done. And the shocking thing about it was he thought it was okay. That sticks out in my mind. How you show no remorse only hours away from doing it, that's scary. So I asked him, I said, "Well, Wesley, I need to know one thing. Why'd you cut her wrist so bad for?" He didn't wait a second. He replied real quick, "Oh, I want to make sure she was dead." I know I'm sitting in a room now with a sociopath.
Today, 19-year-old Wesley Miller was charged with the Stratton murder. Miller was chosen best all-around senior at his high school last year, the same school where Retha Stratton cheered.
When it comes out that it's Wesley Miller, the River Oaks community probably did not want to admit that it was one of their own that had committed these acts. Even the victims had a hard time believing that.
It was unbelievable to think that someone who we all trusted, someone who we considered a friend, could do this.
Not only had we lost Retha, but we were all trying to wrap our heads around the fact that one of our friends took her.
Then I realized Wesley met the description of my rapist. He knew I was going to be home that night because Roxy was supposed to pick me up. At that point, it all fit for me. Everything started to piece together that this was cheerleader, cheerleader, cheerleader. Someone's a family of a cheerleader. You start looking at the photo and you go, oh, wait, Susan's here and Lisa's there. And then there was Roxy. Of course, Roxy's sister was raped. It's kind of that left side of that picture. Was it intentional that he was picking out particular cheerleaders?
During the trial, I felt like a guilty verdict was assured, and I felt like they should give him a life sentence.
I couldn't even understand why, when someone gave a confession that they did it, why were we doing all of this? I remember always asking the DA, when is he going to be charged with the rape cases? And it was like, well, we've got him on this, we think we're going to get a life sentence. We received the guilty verdict, and during the punishment phase, the jury needed to decide, how long he would serve for this murder. And during that process, the jury was not allowed to know about any of the pending charges. And so they were not allowed to know that he was a suspect in other rapes.
I felt like they should give him a life sentence. But he had an excellent defense attorney who made an appeal before that jury in the punishment phase. He played that game of please don't take his life away from him, and they bought into it evidently.
And so the jury handed down a sentence of 25 years.
I'll never understand why he was given 25 years. It's basically the minimum. People get longer sentences for stealing a car. It was an incredibly light sentence.
So then I thought, what happened to me, that'll add more to it. You know, that's where we'll get him, because they're gonna get him on all these other rapes. And then it didn't happen.
He was sentenced for one of the sexual assaults. He was given 20 years in what's called a concurrent sentence. So at the same time he's serving 25 years for the murder, he's serving 20 years for the sexual assault. So essentially no additional time for the sexual assault.
For all of us that had been victims of him, it was almost a slap in the face. You want justice to prevail, and 25 years was not justice for any of us, for the community.
Football is big in Texas. There's no getting around that. And sometimes football players seem to get the benefit of the doubt from the jury. We want to cut them a break. We want to give them a chance. It seems to matter that they are football players when it really shouldn't. We hear people say, Wesley had potential. There are things that he could have done with his life. But people don't take the time to talk about the potential of Retha. And honestly, it's irritating when we talk about the potential of these athletes and we don't focus nearly enough on the potential of the lives that they took.
Society out there in River Oaks, I think they took a step back and had to look at life a little bit differently. After what Wesley Wayne Miller did in their little small community and the lives that he changed and impacted forever.
I hope Retha knows that the grave wasn't the end of her story, and we will keep her story alive. And we will make sure Wesley Miller doesn't hurt other people.
I miss her every day. I think about all the things that she's missed. Getting married, having children. So many things, so many things. It's been 40 years, but it might as well have been yesterday.